The throne room of the Xeraxi Empire gleamed with cold light, its high ceilings stretching toward a sky that shimmered like liquid silver. Queen Lyrithe sat upon her elevated throne, her long, blue-flecked hair cascading down her shoulders, eyes sharp as the edge of a blade. Around her, the nobles of the empire shifted nervously, each hoping that this day would finally see their ambitions rewarded. For years, the queen had been asked to choose a consort, a partner who could not only share her throne but also embody the strength and power that her people valued above all. Yet time and again, she had refused. Each noble offered seemed more concerned with showing off weapons, titles, and bloodlines than understanding the true weight of leadership. The queen's gaze swept across the polished marble floor, resting briefly on each candidate, before she shook her head. None of them were right. Outside the throne room, word spread quickly. Whispers of the queen's indecision carried through the corridors and marketplaces of the empire. Many nobles muttered that Lyrathe's pride was foolish. Others speculated she might never marry at all. But Lyrathe herself had a different thought entirely. Strength alone was not enough. Power without compassion could destroy an empire from within, and she had long wanted something different, not a partner who would only reflect her own image, but someone who could show her a side of the universe she had never known. Her chance came unexpectedly. A diplomatic mission brought her to Earth. A small, blue planet that the Xeraxi had long considered insignificant. While the nobles scoffed at the visit, the queen found herself intrigued. Earth was chaotic, messy, and unpredictable. Its people were fragile, yes, but they had something rare: heart. In a crowded city street filled with smoke and the sound of sirens, she first saw him. Marcus Hale was not remarkable at first glance. He walked with a calm, purposeful stride, his uniform faded and dusty from hours of volunteer work at a nearby disaster zone. He helped injured civilians rise, guided children to safety, and offered clear directions to those who panicked. His eyes were steady, unflinching, yet warm. Lyrathe watched from the shadows, fascinated. The humans she had studied in her history logs were often described as violent or weak, prone to panic or surrender. Yet here was one who moved with quiet authority, earning trust without a weapon, without orders, without fear. She approached him, her presence commanding enough to silence the crowd. Marcus looked up, surprised but not frightened. He had been trained to handle emergencies, but he had never seen an alien queen in the flesh before. His voice was calm as he greeted her politely, answering her questions with clarity and honesty. Lyrathe found herself intrigued not by his knowledge, but by the way he carried himself: steady, measured, kind. By the time the nobles accompanying her arrived, she had made her decision. The queen, who had rejected the most powerful and cunning leaders in her empire, now chose Marcus Hale. The announcement sent shockwaves back home. Many whispered that she had chosen a fragile human, one who could never survive the political and martial challenges of the Xeraxi court. Yet Lyrathe remained resolute. She saw potential where others saw weakness. When Marcus arrived at the Xeraxi palace, he struggled with the grandeur and the expectations. The halls were taller than any building he had seen on Earth, and the ceilings reflected the light in ways that made the palace seem alive. Nobles passed judgment in whispers and glances, some daring to question the queen's choice openly. "A human? For the throne?" they muttered. "She will regret it when he cannot defend himself or the empire." Marcus, however, ignored the murmurs. He had faced hardship on Earth that few could imagine. His life had taught him patience, humility, and courage, and he had no desire to impress anyone with titles or displays of strength. Lyrathe watched him closely, curious to see how he would handle her world. She noticed that while he moved quietly, he was always aware of his surroundings. He observed the palace guards, the nobles, the subtle tensions in conversations. He listened more than he spoke, yet when he did speak, his words carried weight. There was no arrogance in him, only confidence born of experience. Despite this, the empire continued to doubt him. Nobles tested his patience with insults, with challenges, and even with subtle traps meant to embarrass him. Marcus responded with courtesy, deflecting hostility with calm logic, never raising his voice or retaliating. The queen admired his restraint, yet she could feel a hidden power beneath it. He was no ordinary human. Days turned into weeks, and the noble's attempts to provoke Marcus grew more daring. One day, during a ceremonial inspection, a group of young nobles pushed him into a political debate he did not seek. They argued about resource allocations and military strategies, expecting the human to fail, to look foolish. Marcus listened quietly, then replied with simple but clear points. His suggestions, based on efficiency, foresight, and empathy for the people, highlighted flaws the seasoned nobles had overlooked. The court was stunned into silence. The nobles tried to mask their surprise, but their discomfort was visible. Lyrithi, sitting on her throne, felt a spark of pride. She had chosen wisely, yet Marcus did not seek glory. He did not care for admiration or titles. He helped because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted recognition. The queen realized that this human was not only brave but also wise in ways that her empire often ignored. She began to understand that strength came in many forms, not only in weapons or power, but in heart, intelligence, and courage under pressure. Outside the palace, a storm was brewing. The Varkun Dominion, a hostile alien faction long at odds with the Xeraxi, began making aggressive moves near the border worlds. The nobles saw only an opportunity to test Marcus, convinced that he could not possibly survive a real threat. Lyrithi, however, trusted him more than ever. She had seen glimpses of what he could do when faced with danger, and she knew the rumors of his past life on Earth were only half the story. One evening, as Marcus walked through the gardens of the palace, Lyrithi joined him. The gardens were alien in beauty, with plants that glowed faintly in the dim light, and fountains that reflected constellations not visible from Earth. She asked him why he had chosen a quiet life, why he had not sought power or fame. Marcus paused, looking at the alien flora, and then at her. He spoke simply, without boast, explaining that he had seen too much destruction, lost too many friends, and wanted peace. That was why he accepted her offer to live not as a hero, but as a partner to someone who understood him. The queen felt a mixture of admiration and unease. She knew that peace was fragile, especially for her empire, and yet, here was a human who had faced life and death situations on a scale she could only imagine. He had survived, not because he sought victory, but because he understood what mattered: people, choices, and responsibility. Lyrithi began to see that she had not just chosen a consort, but someone who could change the very future of her empire. Word of Marcus's abilities slowly reached the palace's military leaders. Some began to worry, realizing that the queen's choice might not be as weak as they assumed. Others, blinded by arrogance, dismissed him as a human who could never truly match a Xeraxi warrior. Lyrithi, however, kept watching, observing every action, every glance, every decision. She knew the day would come when his true strength would be revealed. And when that day arrived, the Empire would learn a lesson it could never forget: that sometimes, legends came not from titles or weapons, but from quiet courage, calm intelligence, and the heart to do what was right. By the end of the first week, Marcus had begun to settle into palace life. He walked among the people of the Empire with respect and humility, earning the admiration of servants, guards, and even a few skeptical nobles. He helped the wounded, trained with palace guards, and offered insight into Earth technology that inspired innovation among the Xeraxi engineers. And yet, despite all this, he remained modest, never boasting, never seeking attention. Lyrithi observed him with growing respect and curiosity. She realized something that night as she gazed across the glowing city from her tower. The human she had chosen was more than she had expected. He was patient, brave, kind, and intelligent. He had not come to conquer her world, yet he had already begun to transform it. Lyrithi understood, with sudden clarity, that she had not simply chosen a companion. She had chosen a partner, who might one day save the Empire, not through force or domination, but through courage, wisdom, and heart. And so, as the lights of the city reflected in her eyes, the Queen waited, knowing that the day was coming when Marcus Hale would have to reveal the full measure of his strength. Until then, she would watch, protect, and trust him. For she already sensed that this quiet human held within him a power far greater than the Empire had ever known. The first warning came quietly, almost unnoticed. Scouts at the outer rim of the Xeraxi Empire detected strange movements near the border worlds, signals of ships moving faster than their scanners could track. Larathi was in the council chamber, surrounded by generals who were used to giving commands, not receiving questions. Marcus stood at her side, his posture calm, his eyes scanning the holomap projected in midair. The nobles whispered among themselves, some sneering at the human consort. "He has no experience in Xeraxi warfare," they murmured. "How can he possibly advise the Queen?" Marcus ignored the whispers. He studied the patterns of the approaching vessels, noting inconsistencies in their formation. They were not merely scouting. These ships were probing weaknesses, testing defenses, searching for an advantage. The Varkun Dominion, a hostile alien race long at odds with the Xeraxi, was preparing for something larger. One of the senior generals spoke first, his voice sharp and authoritative. "Your Majesty, we have detected the Varkun fleet. We must respond immediately with the full strike force. Delay could be catastrophic." Marcus tilted his head slightly, observing the data. "With respect, General," he said calmly. "A direct strike might fall into a trap. Their pattern is irregular, almost as if they expect us to respond aggressively. I suggest we strengthen the border defenses and prepare a controlled engagement. Draw them in where we have the advantage." The generals laughed, some openly. "You, a human, would dictate strategy for the Empire. You do not understand our ships, our weapons, or our tactics." Lirathi's eyes narrowed. She had seen enough of Marcus to trust him, even when the council doubted him. "We will consider his advice," she said firmly. "Prepare a defensive perimeter as he suggests. We will not rush blindly into battle." The council fell silent. For once, their queen had spoken with certainty, and their protests carried little weight. Meanwhile, Marcus moved through the palace quietly, preparing for what he already knew was coming. He had been a soldier once, part of elite human strike forces that executed impossible missions. He had faced ambushes, hostile forces, and overwhelming odds. He had survived because he understood movement, timing, and the unpredictability of life. Now, far from Earth, he was once again confronted with an enemy that underestimated him. Days passed, and small skirmishes confirmed his fears. The Varkun tested the Empire at multiple points, striking lightly, retreating quickly. Xeraxi generals responded with brute force, losing ships and men in ways that could have been avoided. Marcus quietly advised adjustments, redeploying ships, anticipating ambushes, and using the Empire's knowledge of local space currents to their advantage. His suggestions, simple yet precise, began to reduce casualties. One evening, while inspecting the palace fleet, Marcus noticed a subtle flaw in the defensive grid. A minor error in patrol rotations created a blind spot that the Varkun could exploit. He reported it to the lead general, who dismissed him at first, calling it an unnecessary complication. Marcus stood firm, explaining exactly how the blind spot could allow a strike team to board a station undetected. The general finally relented, reluctantly adjusting the patrol schedule. Within hours, a small Varkun attack was thwarted exactly as Marcus predicted. Larathi watched the reports come in. She felt a mixture of pride and awe. Her human consort, who seemed so ordinary in peaceful moments, had the mind and instincts of a warrior who had survived countless battles. The nobles, who had mocked him from the beginning, began to whisper differently now, their doubts tinged with unease. Then came the first real assault. The Varkun launched a sudden raid on a royal convoy transporting critical supplies to a border world. The attack was swift and brutal, hitting with a force the Xeraxi generals had not anticipated. Chaos spread through the fleet. Ships collided, weapons systems malfunctioned under the intensity of the assault, and alarms blared across every command deck. Marcus did not hesitate. He moved with precision, coordinating small teams of guards and technicians, directing evacuation routes for civilians aboard the supply ships. Where the generals panicked, Marcus remained calm, issuing clear instructions that saved countless lives. He even personally guided a group of children to safety, using narrow maintenance tunnels to bypass zones of heavy fire. Lyrith followed him at a distance, her breath catching as she saw the human's skill in action. When a group of Varkun boarding parties breached the convoy's hull, Marcus acted decisively. With no traditional weapon at hand, he used environmental tools, magnetic clamps, hull panels, and even energy conduits to disable the invaders one by one. His movements were fluid, precise, and deadly, yet not reckless. Guards who had laughed at him before now watched in disbelief as he single-handedly neutralized threats while keeping the crew and civilians safe. Lyrith felt a surge of something she could not name. Shock, admiration, and a strange warmth filled her chest as she realized what she had married. This human, quiet and unassuming, was not merely capable, he was exceptional. She had underestimated him in her curiosity, and now she saw the truth. Marcus was more than a consort. He was a force the Empire could not afford to ignore. After the convoy was secured and the Varkun retreat began, the Queen sought a private moment with Marcus. They walked together along the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You did not have to reveal so much," she said softly. "You could have stayed in the shadows, and yet you acted without hesitation." Marcus shook his head. "I cannot watch people die when I can help. That is not courage, it is responsibility. I am not seeking glory, only to do what must be done." The Queen studied him closely. His calm eyes met hers, and she realized the depth of his strength. It was not the strength of weapons or numbers, it was the strength of character, the unwavering courage to act correctly under pressure, the intelligence to see patterns that others could not, and the selflessness to protect those who could not protect themselves. Word of Marcus's actions spread quickly through the palace and beyond. The nobles who had doubted him whispered to one another, their skepticism turning into wary respect. Some plotted secretly, fearing that if he gained too much influence, their positions would be threatened. Others, wiser or more cautious, began to observe him, trying to understand what made him so effective. Meanwhile, the Varkun Dominion prepared for a larger strike. Intelligence reports indicated that they had underestimated the human consort and assumed the Queen's forces were disorganized. Marcus, now fully aware that he had become a target, continued to act quietly but decisively. He coordinated defensive measures, optimized fleet formations, and trained teams to anticipate enemy movements. During one training exercise, a group of young Zeraxi officers attempted to mock him, creating simulated ambushes to test the human's abilities. Marcus did not react with anger. Instead, he used the exercises to teach the officers, showing them new strategies, highlighting weaknesses in their assumptions, and demonstrating techniques that combined human ingenuity with Zeraxi technology. By the end of the session, the officers were not mocking him, they were learning from him, amazed at how much they had overlooked. The Queen watched silently from her private gallery. Each demonstration, each tactical insight, and each moment of calm courage reinforced what she had begun to suspect. Marcus was extraordinary. He had not sought to impress or dominate. He simply acted according to what was right, and in doing so, he inspired everyone around him, even the most cynical nobles and hardened soldiers. As the Varkun fleet continued to advance, Marcus prepared the Empire for the coming conflict. He anticipated their attacks, predicted their maneuvers, and coordinated both defensive and offensive measures. The nobles who had once mocked him now worked alongside him, sometimes reluctantly, but increasingly with respect. The palace itself became a center of quiet energy, focused and disciplined under his guidance. One evening, after reviewing reports from the border worlds, Marcus returned to the Queen. The stars reflected in her eyes as she met his gaze. "The fleet is ready," he said simply. "They do not know what is coming, but we will be prepared. Lyrathi nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. You are more than I imagined, she said softly. Not just strong. Not just clever, but someone who sees clearly when others cannot. Marcus smiled faintly. I am only human, he said. Though even as he spoke, she could see the truth in his eyes. He was more than human. He was a legend in the making, though he did not yet realize it himself. The first real battle had been a warning. The Varkun Dominion would not stop, and the Empire would face challenges unlike any it had seen. But with Marcus Hale by her side, the Queen knew one thing for certain. She had chosen wisely. The man beside her would not only survive the storm but might lead her people through it in ways no one could have predicted. And as the stars shimmered across the observation deck, Lyrathi made a silent vow. She would protect him, trust him, and stand beside him. For she knew that the true measure of a hero was not in weapons, titles, or bloodlines. It was in courage, intelligence, and heart. And Marcus Hale had all three in abundance. The Empire waited, unaware that its future rested in the quiet strength of the human consort. The man who had already begun to change everything simply by being who he was. The Varkun fleet grew larger each day, a dark shadow at the edge of Zeraxi space. Scouts reported hundreds of ships, faster and more heavily armed than anything the Empire had encountered before. The nobles panicked, calling for immediate counterattacks and more aggressive measures. Lyrathi watched them quietly, her mind on Marcus Hale, the human who had already saved lives and prevented disaster on multiple occasions. She knew the Empire had never faced a threat like this, and she trusted Marcus's judgment more than that of any general or noble. Marcus had spent hours studying the Varkun movements, reading patterns that no one else could see. He noted how the enemy favored unpredictable maneuvers and sudden strikes. Where the generals saw chaos, Marcus saw logic unconventional. Human logic, born from years of facing impossible situations and surviving. In a private meeting, Lyrathi asked, "What do you suggest?" Marcus spread the holomap before them, outlining a strategy that combined human unpredictability with Zeraxi firepower. "We cannot fight them head-on," he explained. "They expect brute force. We will use that against them. A small, coordinated strike team can target their supply lines and disrupt their command structure. Meanwhile, the main fleet holds the line, appearing weaker than we actually are. They will overextend, and that is when we strike decisively." The generals protested. "This is risky. We could lose entire fleets." Marcus's gaze was steady. "We risk losing fleets if we act without thought. This plan minimizes casualties and uses the Varkun's own arrogance against them. Trust me, Your Majesty. This will work if we follow it exactly." Lyrathi nodded. She saw the calm certainty in Marcus, the same calm that had saved the convoy weeks ago. "We follow your plan," she declared. "Full preparation begins immediately." The nobles grumbled, but Marcus ignored them. He began coordinating teams, assigning roles, and training both seasoned soldiers and inexperienced recruits. He did not speak in commands to intimidate. He spoke with clarity, explaining each movement and the reasoning behind it. The Zeraxi soldiers, at first skeptical, began to respect him. His calm confidence inspired them in a way that weapons and titles never could. Meanwhile, Lyrathi continued her observations. She watched Marcus interact with the palace staff, the fleet commanders, and even the young nobles who had once mocked him. He treated everyone with the same respect and attention, never condescending, never boasting. Yet beneath the calm exterior, she sensed a depth of experience and power the humans around him could barely imagine. Then came the first sign that the Varkun were planning a direct assault. Scouts detected a large fleet heading toward the capital itself. Panic rippled through the palace. The nobles demanded immediate action, arguing for a full-scale attack to meet the enemy in open space. Marcus, however, remained focused, his mind working through every possible scenario. "They are aiming for the palace," he said quietly. Their goal is not just conquest, they want to capture me. They believe I am weak. We must protect the civilians and lure them into a trap. Brute force will fail. Strategy will win. The generals were incredulous. You, a human, tell us how to defend the capital? You underestimate the scale of this battle. Marcus shook his head. I am not underestimating it. I am seeing it clearly. That is the difference. Lyrathi felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. She knew that the human consort she had chosen was about to be tested as never before. And yet, she had no doubt he would rise to the occasion. The battle began at dawn. Varkun's ships appeared on the horizon, sleek and deadly, their weapons blazing. The palace fleet moved into position, carefully following Marcus's plan. At first, the attack seemed chaotic. Varkun forces struck rapidly, targeting vulnerable points, and some Ziraxi ships were destroyed. But Marcus's strategy began to take effect. The enemy overextended, falling into traps and ambushes the humans had set. From the observation deck, Lyrathi watched Marcus coordinate with incredible precision. He moved between communication terminals, issuing instructions calmly, predicting enemy movements, and adjusting tactics on the fly. Where the Ziraxi generals panicked, Marcus remained steady, a beacon of calm in the storm. The tide began to turn. Ziraxi ships, following Marcus's unconventional tactics, struck the Varkun at weak points no one else had noticed. Boarding parties failed, ambushes were countered, and the Varkun flagship was revealed to be far more vulnerable than their fleet suggested. Lyrathi could not tear her eyes from Marcus. Every move he made, every decision he gave, displayed not just courage but brilliance. He was not fighting for glory. He was fighting to protect his people, to protect her, and to save a civilization that had never believed in him. In the midst of battle, a Varkun strike team boarded the palace itself. Alarms rang through the corridors, and the nobles panicked. Lyrathi's guards rushed to defend her, but Marcus had already anticipated this. He led a small team, moving with speed and precision, neutralizing the intruders before they could reach the queen. One of the soldiers, a young Ziraxi officer, stared at Marcus in disbelief. "How is he?" he whispered, unable to comprehend the human's skill. "He is human," the general replied, voice trembling. "But, somehow, more than that." The Varkun commander's voice came through the palace communication system, taunting them. "Your human consort is weak. Capture him, and your queen will fall." Marcus's expression remained calm. "If he thinks I am weak, he will be very wrong." He led his team forward, moving through corridors, disabling intruders with a combination of strategy, timing, and clever use of the environment. Lyrathi watched, astonished, as Marcus acted faster, smarter, and braver than anyone she had ever seen. After repelling the boarding party, Marcus returned to the observation deck. The main battle was still raging, but the palace was safe. The queen stepped forward, her voice low. "Marcus, you are incredible. I did not understand before, but now, I see who you truly are." Marcus shook his head, still calm but exhausted. "I am only doing what must be done. That is all." The Varkun fleet, sensing failure, regrouped for a final strike, concentrating their attack on the capital. Marcus's mind worked quickly. He identified the flagship, the vessel coordinating the assault, and formulated a risky plan. He would lead a small strike team directly to the enemy command ship, disable their weapons, and disrupt their coordination. Many believed the mission was suicidal. Lyrathi refused to let him go alone. "I cannot lose you," she said, her voice trembling. "Not now. Not ever." Marcus met her eyes. "You will not lose me, I promise. But if we do not act decisively, the Empire will fall. I cannot wait." Reluctantly, Lyrathi gave her consent. She watched as Marcus assembled his team, each member chosen for skill, bravery, and loyalty. He led them through the fleet with precision, guiding ships past enemy fire, using unconventional maneuvers to avoid destruction. The Varkun flagship loomed ahead, massive and deadly. But Marcus did not hesitate. He coordinated boarding pods, timed attacks, and led his team aboard with exacting skill. Inside the enemy vessel, Marcus's training from Earth and his experience with impossible missions shone brilliantly. He and his team moved through the corridors, disabling weapons, avoiding traps, and confronting Varkun soldiers with unmatched efficiency. Every move was calculated, every decision precise. He was no longer a quiet human consort, he was a master tactician, a leader, and a warrior without equal. Meanwhile, Lyrathi observed from the fleet command center, her heart pounding. She realized fully for the first time that she had married not just a human, but a legend in the making. Every action Marcus took, every life he saved, every obstacle he overcame, revealed a man who had chosen peace, yet could command war with brilliance when forced to. Hours passed, and the battle reached its climax. The Varkun flagship, its weapons disabled, its crew demoralized, began to fall under the coordinated attacks of Marcus's team. He faced the Varkun commander directly, moving with precision, intelligence, and courage. The fight was not about brute strength, it was about strategy, timing, and refusal to surrender. Marcus disarmed the commander and neutralized the ship's systems, turning the tide of the entire invasion. When he returned to the palace fleet, battered but alive, the Varkun forces were in full retreat. The Empire had survived, not because of overwhelming numbers or raw power, but because of the quiet, steady brilliance of one human who refused to give in to fear or arrogance. The nobles who had once doubted him bowed in genuine respect. Soldiers who had mocked him now looked to him for guidance. And the Queen, standing at the observation deck, realized something she had not fully understood before. She had married not a mere human, but a legend who had chosen to live quietly, yet could change the fate of an entire civilization. She stepped forward as Marcus returned, her voice full of emotion. "You did not just fight for the Empire," she said. "You fought for me, for the people, and for what is right. You are more than I could have imagined." Marcus shook his head, smiling faintly. "I only did what needed to be done. That is all anyone can do." Lyrathi took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength of a man who had already proven himself beyond any doubt. "You are not only my consort," she said quietly. "You are my partner, my equal, and the heart of this empire. And now, I see that the stories about human weakness were wrong. Humanity can create legends." For the first time, the Empire understood what the Queen had known all along. Strength was not measured by titles, weapons, or bloodlines. Strength was measured by courage, intelligence, compassion, and the refusal to surrender to fear. And Marcus Hale, the quiet human from Earth, embodied all of it. The stars shone over the battlefield, reflecting in Lyrathi's eyes as she watched her human consort. She realized fully that this man, who had chosen peace but acted decisively when required, had not only saved the Empire but had begun to change it forever. The remnants of the Varkun fleet were scattered, but their flagship remained, damaged yet dangerous, moving swiftly toward the capital. Alarms echoed through the palace as sensors detected the ship approaching civilian zones. Lyrathi stood on the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the incoming threat. The Queen had seen Marcus fight before, but this time, the stakes were even higher. Hundreds of lives hung in the balance, and the fate of the Empire itself teetered on the edge. Marcus stood beside her, calm as ever, his mind already running through possibilities. He had studied the enemy's movements, predicted their maneuvers, and calculated the risks. Now, action was required. He gathered a strike team, composed of Ziraxi soldiers who had trained under him, and briefed them with clear, concise instructions. Every movement, every role, was designed to maximize efficiency and minimize risk. "The flagship is targeting civilian sectors," Marcus said. "We must board and neutralize it before it reaches the capital. Failure is not an option. Stay focused, follow the plan exactly, and we will succeed." The soldiers, though nervous, nodded. Marcus's calm confidence had a ripple effect. Where fear had once dominated, determination now took its place. The team moved quickly, boarding pods racing through space as the Varkun ship closed in. Lyrathi followed from the command center, monitoring their progress and holding her breath with every transmission. As Marcus and his team breached the enemy flagship, chaos erupted. The corridors were narrow, the Varkun soldiers numerous, and the ship's systems were rigged with traps designed to kill intruders. Marcus moved like a shadow, disabling weapons, leading his team, and countering enemy attacks with ingenuity rather than brute force. He used the ship's environment to his advantage, triggering magnetic fields, sealing compartments, and creating safe paths for his team. A group of Varkun soldiers blocked their path, heavily armed and confident. Marcus assessed the situation quickly. With a small combination of calculated movements, timing, and clever use of energy conduits, he neutralized the threat. The soldiers fell back, astonished at his skill. One whispered to another, "This human, he is no ordinary warrior." Meanwhile, Lyrathi's heart raced. She had seen Marcus fight before, but this mission was different. It was personal. He was not only defending the Empire, he was protecting her people, the civilians she ruled, and the future of everything she had built. She felt a surge of pride and fear, knowing that one wrong step could cost them everything. Marcus pressed forward, reaching the central command deck of the flagship. There, the Varkun commander awaited, confident that this human was no threat. "You cannot defeat me," the commander sneered, raising his weapon. "Your people will fall, and your queen will suffer." Marcus did not respond with anger or words of defiance. He moved with calm precision, analyzing the commander's stance, the environment, and the ship's systems. In moments, he used the control panels to disable the weapons, creating openings that neutralized the enemy without unnecessary loss of life. The commander was disarmed and restrained by the combined effort of Marcus's team. Back in the capital, the fleet observed the flagship's movements. With its weapons offline and command disrupted, the remaining Varkun ships faltered. Ziraxi ships, following Marcus's earlier strategy, struck decisively, capturing or destroying the enemy vessels one by one. The invasion collapsed in disarray, the Varkun retreating in confusion and defeat. When Marcus and his team returned to the palace, battered but alive, the queen rushed to him. Her eyes glimmered with relief, pride, and awe. "Marcus, you have done it. You saved them all." Marcus shook his head, still composed. "We saved them together. Everyone played their part." Lyrath studied him closely. She had seen his skill, his courage, his intelligence, and his heart. Now, fully, she realized what she had married. "You are more than I imagined," she said softly. "Not just a warrior, not just a strategist. You are a legend." Marcus looked away briefly, a modest smile crossing his face. "I only do what is necessary. That is all anyone can do." The queen stepped closer, her voice firm yet tender. "You are not only necessary, you are extraordinary. You did not fight for glory, yet you became a symbol. You did not seek recognition, yet you saved the Empire. And I am honored to call you my consort." Across the throne room, the nobles and generals had gathered. They had witnessed the human's courage, intelligence, and unyielding spirit. No longer could they dismiss him as weak or unworthy. One by one, they bowed, not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine respect. The Empire, long bound by tradition and hierarchy, had seen the truth. Strength could come in unexpected forms, and humanity so underestimated could create legends. The queen turned back to Marcus. "You have changed everything. The Empire, its people, even me. You have shown us that courage is not measured in titles or bloodlines, but in heart, intelligence, and the choice to act rightly when it matters most." Marcus remained humble. "I do not seek to change the Empire. I only seek to do what is right. Lyrithy smiled, a mixture of admiration and affection in her eyes. And yet, by doing what is right, you have changed everything. She took his hand, feeling the strength, warmth, and certainty that radiated from him. I chose you for your heart, but now I see that your spirit is unmatched. You are my equal, my partner, and the force that saved my people. The palace erupted in celebration, but Lyrathi remained focused on Marcus. Soldiers, nobles, and civilians all praised him. But she saw him as he truly was: quiet, calm, and extraordinary. His legend had been revealed, not through ambition or pride, but through courage, wisdom, and compassion. In the days that followed, the empire began to change. The nobles, inspired by Marcus's example, adopted new strategies that valued intelligence, compassion, and creativity alongside traditional strength. The soldiers trained under his guidance, learning tactics that combined human ingenuity with Zeraxi technology. Citizens of the empire spoke of the human consort who had saved them, and children whispered stories of his bravery, kindness, and cleverness. Lyrathi watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. Her decision to choose Marcus had been questioned by many, but now it was clear. She had chosen wisely, not for appearances, not for power, but for heart, courage, and intellect. In doing so, she had found someone who could protect the empire, inspire its people, and stand beside her as an equal partner. One evening, as the sun of the capital world set over the crystalline towers, Lyrathi and Marcus stood together on a balcony. The city below shimmered in soft light, reflecting the triumph and renewal of the empire. You never sought glory, the queen said softly. And yet, the entire empire now knows your name. Marcus, hail, human consort, savior, and legend. Marcus smiled faintly. I never wanted glory. I wanted only to protect those who could not protect themselves. I wanted to live simply, peacefully. But the choice was never mine alone. You gave me the chance to act, to do what was right, and I took it. Lyrathi's hand found his, and she held it firmly. And in doing so, you have taught us all a lesson. Strength is not only in weapons or titles, it is in heart, courage, and wisdom. You have shown the empire what it means to be human, and in doing so, you have changed us forever. Marcus looked at her, his calm eyes meeting hers. I could not have done it without you, Your Majesty. Without your trust, your understanding, I would have been just a man alone in the stars. But with you, we were a force that could not be stopped. The queen smiled, a mixture of love, pride, and admiration in her eyes. And so, the empire has learned that legends are not born, they are made. Through choices, courage, and heart. And I have married a legend. From that day forward, Marcus Hale was no longer seen as a simple human consort. He was a symbol of what humanity could achieve: courage under pressure, intelligence in chaos, and unwavering compassion in the face of danger. The Zeraxi Empire flourished, blending tradition with innovation, strength with wisdom, and power with heart. The Varkun threat had been defeated, but their memory served as a reminder of what the empire could face in the future. And now, with Marcus Hale at the queen's side, the people knew they had a leader unlike any other. A human who had chosen peace, yet could stand as a warrior and a legend when the time demanded it. Lyrathi looked at Marcus one last time that evening, the stars reflecting in his eyes. She realized fully what she had seen all along, but only now truly understood. She had not married a man merely for companionship. She had married a legend. A human who had faced impossible odds, chosen courage, and acted with heart. The empire slept peacefully that night, the people safe, the nobles united, and the future bright. And in the quiet of the palace, Lyrathi and Marcus stood together, knowing that whatever challenges awaited, they would face them as partners, equals, and heroes. The story of Marcus Hale, the human consort who became a legend, would be told for generations. It would inspire soldiers, citizens, and children alike. It would remind them that strength was not always measured by size, power, or bloodline, but by courage, intelligence, and the refusal to surrender in the face of danger. And through it all, Lyraith would never forget the truth she had discovered. She had married a legend, and he had just saved her entire civilization.